Hi everyone, this video is going to serve as a brief intro into section 6-1, Concepts and Representation of Decimals. Again, what I would encourage you to do is make sure that you are reading through the textbook, and I would also consult the slides for this section. So to begin, we want to note that decimals actually comes from a Latin word that stands for 10, and that kind of should resonate with you already because we work with a base 10 system, or in other words, our system is a decimal system. Deci stands for 10, and again, if you recall from, I believe it was chapter 3, we were talking about how our decimal system uses 10 unique digits, 0 through 9. So for this particular video, I have an example of 24.579. What I want you to note is that that is not the proper way to read this number. We actually want to go ahead and name the place value. So again, let me go ahead and bold that decimal point. If you recall from class last time, we said that 2 was in the, for example, tens place. The 4 was in a ones place. And then what happens after the decimal? We immediately go into the tenths place. So it starts to have a THS attached to it. And it somewhat mirrors what we see on the left side of the decimal point. Just note in this case, well, not in this case, but just with any decimal, the place value immediately after the decimal point is the tenths place. There is no such thing as a oneths place, okay? So that means that my 7 is in the hundredths place. And then I also have a 9 in the thousandths place. And then it continues, so then it's 10,000ths, 100,000ths, millionths, 10 millionths, 100 millionths, billionths, and so on. What I also want to talk to you about is this idea of rounding, okay? So if, for example, I was told to round to, let's say, the tens place, so I want to round here. What I would do is, I would take a look at the number to the right, and I notice that it's a 4. If the value that is next to the number that you want to round to, or the place that you want to round to, is a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4. So in other words, the first 5 of your digits from your decimal system, the number in the place that you want to round to will not change. So in this case, because there's a 4, I know that I'm going to leave this as a 2. The ones place immediately goes to a 0. And then technically you could change all of your decimal values to zeros, but we're more likely just going to write 20 as our solution. So again, this is if we round to the tens place. There might be some instances where you're asked to round to a place value to the right of the decimal point. So let's take a look at an example of that. All right, let me clean this up a little bit. Let me get this out of here as well, so that we have a fresh, clean slate. Okay, so say for example we want to round to the hundredths place. Oop, that's not what I meant to do. Let's try that again. Hundredths place. This is our goal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the value to the right, and I notice that it's a 9. In this case, or I should say in any case, your rules state that if it is a 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, or in other words, the last 5 of your digits from your decimal system, we're going to round our value up. Okay? So what this means is anything to the left of our desired number is just going to fall down. It's not going to be changed. But this 7 is now going to change to an 8. Again, you could technically put a 0 here, so anything after that number will be zeros. But again, since it's after the decimal point, it's a little overkill, so you can just leave your answer like so. And again, this is rounded to the hundredths place. Now, what if, for example, I wanted you to round it to the tenths place? So again, I would look at the 5. That's my goal spot. I'm going to turn to the right and notice that it's a 7. Since it is a 7, and again, so in other words, it's 5 or bigger, I'm going to go ahead and round this value up. My result would be 24, and this we would round up to a 6. So this would become 24 and 6/10. Again, rounded to the tenths place. I encourage you to take some time, make up some of your own examples, and do some rounding. Change the digits around. Make sure that you have these rules down. They are also outlined in your textbook and your slide. Let's just do one more. Let's say I want you to round to the ones place. So I know that my goal is going to be at the ones place. Oops. I'm going to look to the right, and I have a 5. So this means, again, the 2 is not going to be affected because it's to the left of our desired spot. But since I have a 5 to the right, I'm going to round up. You could put zeros after it. It's overkill once you start going into decimal place values. So this example of 25 is the rounded form of our number, rounded to the ones place. Okay. This pretty much sums up our work with this. And again, I do want to note that we want to make sure that we're reading our numbers appropriately. So again, if we were to read our number here, I would say that this number is 24, and, so let's call that out, the decimal point will have the word, will be represented by the word and. So this is 24 and 579 thousandths. So we want to end in the place where our decimal point ends. So again, if we keep going, if we look at our next example, this would be 24 and 58 hundredths, because our decimal place ends in the hundredth spot. So again, if we look at 24 and 6/10, because it ends there. Now, one other example just to kind of drive this home. So if we did, say, let's look at this number. Let's go crazy and add another digit. So when we read this, make sure that the only time you say and is to represent the decimal point. So for example, I don't want you to say 531 and 8,073 10,000ths. That's too much. The and, it's going to get confusing, because notice that I had to say it twice. How you actually want to read this, and let's go ahead and kind of label things. So again, if you need to, feel free to call it out for yourself. I would also note what this spot is that your decimal is in. So remember that the 8 is in the tenths, the 0 is in the hundredths, the 7 is in the thousandths, and the 3 is in the 10,000ths. And feel free to go ahead and label your stuff out. It's totally fine. So how I would read this would be 531 and 8,073 10,000ths. Okay? Again, take some time, create some examples. If you have questions, please come see me.